We're live. We're live.
Yep, we're live now. Welcome to paraglidingtalk.com. I'm your host, Robert Michaels. Glad you're here. We have a great show lined up tonight. We have Harley Milne with us. We're going to talk about all things flying. Harley, if you don't know who he is, you're going to find out quickly that he's an adventure machine. You're really going to enjoy this episode. He's also been on the show multiple times. We're going to have a great time. I want to mention a couple sponsors. One of those is our sponsor, PPG Smoke. PPGsmoke.com is the website. Go check them out. They have some great stuff on the shelf for your flying. We'll call them trinkets, headsets, lamels, chase cams, strobes, floats, all these things. Ryan Roberts is an engineer. He's created this stuff just for fun for you and I. There is some updates on the Unity headset. The new version, which worked out all those kinks and all those issues that they had. So supposedly they're all fixed. Everything's ready to rock and roll. By the 26th, I believe he said, they will be shipping out 150 of those per week or per month. Let me just look at his text he sent me a little while ago. And yeah, really cool stuff. Oh, also, there's a build sheet that he's got on his website. If you're wanting to put a helmet together, go check those out. Yeah, let me see here. He sent this on track to do 150 units released per day starting on the 26th of June. So that's a great thing. Go check out his website, ppgsmoke.com. Also, Harley Milne's with us. He started a school here in California. The website that he has put together is dreamlifterparamotors.com. We're going to talk about that in the show. Also, another new sponsor is Andrew Fuller. He has a full shop for repairing gliders, checking your trims. I believe he even repacks, does repacks. So you're going to want to go check out his website. That is paraglider-inspection.myshopify.com. There'll be links in the description for that. Also want to mention one more sponsor before we get too deep into this program, paramotorprops.com. If you mess up a prop like I did just 2 weeks ago, you're going to need a prop. Go check out their website, paramotorprops.com. You can buy one there, and they'll be very glad to help you get into the air. And good stuff, good people too. So you'll be supporting a good group of folks. Awesome. Harley, thank you so much for coming on the show and being a part of Paragliding Talk over the years, man. You've always been a great, you've always brought something great to the table, and adventure and excitement. Harley Milne, he flew across all the states, 50 states. He called it the 50X Challenge. He raised funds for different 501c3s all across the country. So he'd show up to your state, and if you wanted to support it, you could do it, and it would be the charity of your choice. Super cool just how it all came together, and he actually pulled it off. He's got a world record under his belt with involving paramotoring. We'll talk a little bit about that tonight. He flew coast to coast from San Diego to Florida on a paramotor, and that was pretty cool. He's got some other things, and again, like I mentioned before, he's got a pretty cool school now here in California. So if you're wanting to learn, if I was just now going to be getting into paramotoring, I would probably want to go to Harley's school because of all the adventure flying that he's done. And that's kind of, I don't know, that's kind of the excitement for me, maybe go on some crazy adventure. So welcome all the people in the chat. Glad you're here. Thank you. All the Patreon supporters. Really appreciate you guys being here. Harley, how has the school been going?
It's been awesome. I think as I shared before, I wasn't in a big hurry to start a school, but I had enough people asking me over the years to whether I would teach. And so I had a few people here and there. But what I found was that there was a little bit of a gap here in Northern California in terms of the area, right? You had the choice of going all the way out to Valley Springs if you lived in San Francisco or Oakland or, the North Bay, or you would go all the way up to Sacramento to go learn with Dave Jewell, all the way up there. So, if the weather didn't really work, you were making multiple trips, and it was a fair distance, and you would have hotels and so forth. And with Blackhawk, the same type of challenge. And so, with me living in Sonoma, it kind of made sense to offer something that was closer to the bay. And so, for the students that I have had, if it stretches out more than a week, it's not a big deal. And in fact, the weather this year has been such that, I've had people over 6 or 7 weeks sort of get through the program and learn to fly. So it's been great from that perspective. I'm hoping that, more and more people will get interested. Typically speaking, I'm only teaching 1 or 2 people at a time, who are going through a full class. I think one of the coolest things that we've been doing is that we've had, pilots that made the transition from PG to PPG and had some experience, but wanted a little bit more help to fine tune those takeoffs and those landings. And so that's been a fantastic opportunity. I have a few guys that bought new equipment or switched the paramotor that they were on, and they've come out for several sessions over a fair length of time. And, they've been so great that, a lot of times I just cut them a fair amount of slack in terms of my time and the costs associated with that. So it's been awesome. And then I think the last part that I'm really trying to find a way to get going is to provide a support mechanism for those people who really want to do some adventure cross-country type stuff, where because I bought a trike, and so that I can take people on tandems and get their discovery flights in, I landed up buying a much bigger trailer than I had before. And so now I'm in a position where I could support 4 or 5 other pilots and say, hey, where would you guys like to fly from and where to? And if they land out or they just want to do a one-way trip, that we can literally pick them up and drive them back to their start point, and do that where they could probably cover between 50 and say 80 miles on a flight one morning, on the weekend. And a lot of paramotor pilots, they may have 1 buddy or 2 buddies. If you've got 2 buddies, then 1 buddy doesn't get to fly, he has to chase you. And if you're like me, where it's difficult to find other people to support those big trips because they want to fly as well. It's a great opportunity. So
that's the hard part.
Yeah. So I'm hoping that picks up quite a bit. I mean, I do need to obviously cover the cost of fuel and doing that, and it's a service, so I would like to make a little bit out of it. It's hard taking money from the local guys who come out and they support the airfield. The airfield that I have is a private airfield, and we take $10 for people to come and fly there each time, and that money goes to the property owners 501c that supports using equestrian and horses to help individuals with PTSD and other types of things. So it's been a great way to support that. So it's hard sometimes to keep taking money from the guys who keep coming out on a regular basis, but it's been an awesome experience so far.
What's your big takeaways from maybe things that you weren't expecting? Obviously, there's some things that when you got involved, you couldn't forecast. Although you're a very organized guy, I have to applaud you for how thorough you are with everything. I think you're the perfect person for instructing. Anything that caught you off guard?
I feel, I mean, I think I knew this coming in, but I feel this huge responsibility now towards really in helping others to be successful with as little risk to them or their equipment. And it hurts. It hurts when somebody has a bad launch and they break a prop. Like it just, I know it's not my fault, but I'm helping them to try and be successful. And so It hurts more than I thought it was going to hurt.
It hurts the it hurts the wallet.
But
That's empathy. You
Yeah.
experience a source of empathy in those situations, because it's like, oh, I know what that feels like. Oh, we'll get you taken care of. We'll get you back up there, and yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean, the flip side of that, I'll just add is, and I'll try and hold one of these up, and I'll tell a little bit of story behind it. So each of my students who go through the Dreamlifter program gets a challenge coin after their first initial flight. And so I've even had a couple people that had flown PG before and even successfully had a flight before, but as they've come through my training, they now get one of these coins for Dreamlifter. I like the back in particular because it's kind of hard to see online here, but it says takeoff is optional and landing is mandatory. So it's kind of just a little reminder that we had. The story behind these actually I was that the first time I went to Aviator, and I was fortunate enough to be invited to help teach a few people to kite, and I received an honorary coin, and I was just like, it's just a fantastic way to recognize the achievement of anyone who goes through what we do. Not everybody is going to be able to do it, and we're still a relatively small community here in the United States, and just having a memento that you'll have for the rest of your life, I think is kind of cool. And I got one
cool.
from Nebraska PPG as well. So, that kind of set me off to do those. And then I went ahead, of course, and did the Dreamlifter one, which it came out very well. I was a little shocked and saying, even down to the detail of the silver on the rose compass in there. So I tried to build in a few different dimensions of aviation. And then I was making fun of Mr. Gringo here earlier. It wasn't cheap, but the Coast to Coast team were so special. I had to find a way to reward them as well. And so
that's awesome.
Coins, kind of like a Guinness World Record type style. And each of the team members that were involved have had one of these. I have a couple left that I have plans for some very special people that helped support and made that whole trip happy, even though they weren't directly one of those teams. But I think I only had 12 of these made, and 8 of them have gone to people. Something that's special. It was very special for me to give the team.
Yeah, those are neat. Little trophies.
Yeah.
I really like the idea of having more schools here in California, because when I get people reaching out to me, it's very difficult for me to point them in the right direction. I'm always like, well, you might be able to convince Phil Russman to teach you, but he doesn't always teach, and he's out of town a lot of times. And it depends if he likes you or not, whether he'll teach you. And then you've got just a couple guys at Torrey Pines, but they're always working on the ridge, and they're not teaching consistently. And I know that when I got involved, I was like, man, I want to fly now. I got to get my feet off the ground. I can't be waiting. And it's nice that you have something going pretty much right away. Something that I was thinking about when you were talking about accidentally blowing up props. I didn't have a whole lot of money when I first got into the sport, and it was very difficult to convince myself, like, okay, we're going to buy this stuff. And then I can't imagine just barely scraping by to get a prop and then blowing one up and having to wait now for a time. I think that would have been, like you were talking about, feeling bad about people breaking stuff. That is that's an aspect, I think. Well, and your price point, that's all very important to the longevity of it.
Yeah, I mean, from my experiences of traveling around all 50 states and getting to meet lots of instructors at different schools, I've seen the success of those individuals, and I've tried to adopt and remember some of the cool things that they did. And I think I think as an instructor, you partly judge your success by how how successful you can make your students without them damaging equipment. So I think that's at least for me, that's a pressure that I have. And so, in the couple of incidents that we've had already, I've tried to look at what occurred and what could I do better as the instructor to go do that. And it's simple little things. I had a gentleman who's flown with me a couple times, has a relatively new wing. He bought himself a Scout, and has made that big jump from a top 80 to a Scout. And, he successfully launched. It was a fairly decent launch. But he was about, I don't know, 100 feet off the air, and I could hear something sort of just touching his prop. And I was like, oh, that sounds terrible. And I was like, turn back. And the next thing, the prop was gone. And
no.
yeah, and all I could see was him disappearing around the corner, and I thought he had flown into the trees. And as it turned out, he did everything perfectly. He realized he had all this glide. He flew straight down, had spaces to go, and landed right on the edge of the road in the grass. Like, it was perfect how he handled everything. But what caused the situation was the radio that he had popped out of the radio harness, and it wasn't properly secured. And ultimately, he was responsible for making sure that had been properly secured. But in one of the checks that I do with a lot of my students, and even if they're fairly experienced and at the point where they are largely launching on their own, making a habit of sort of checking that all of their straps are properly clipped in, that the radio is secure, because we all make mistakes. Like, even when we're flying our own, we've all forgotten to do something, forgot a little strap. So having that little buddy system is valuable. And it's just one of those things that I know that I do, but maybe even as someone is progressing, just tugging on the radio, make sure it's not going to come out, is probably something I'm going to keep doing, and just say, hey, does this feel secure to you? So that we avoid that kind of a situation. It was very unlucky, and it cost him a fair amount of money to fix his equipment, so it sucked.
What was the outcome? What did he stick with it? Is he getting in the air? Is he a lifer, or did he quit?
Oh, no. I mean, so this gentleman, I forget how many flights he has. I mean, with me, he's had 4 or 5 flights, and he's growing exponentially. So he's coming out again this weekend and get back up in the air, and he really is at the point where he's capable, and he knows what he's doing. But you know what it's like when we're still relatively new, just having someone spot you and letting you know that the wing is all straight and ready, and it's okay to go to full power. Just having someone spot you, I think, can make a big difference when you're still relatively new. And so that's the state that he's a good pilot, and he can only get better from here.
Harley, are most of your pilots, or students locally from Napa area, or Southern or Northern California, or are they any of them coming in?
Yeah, right now all of the pilots that I'm taking on are local. There are bigger schools that can take on more students that have different structures that work. Of course, Team Fly Halo operate between Salton Sea, sort of in the cooler months, and then the hotter months go back up to, I think it's Eureka, fairly north. And so they're set up to take a lot of students. They're a much bigger school, a much more well-known school. So people pick and choose. As far as I know, Dave is keeping busy, and Blackhawk are keeping busy. I've got room. Like, I definitely have room to grow here and do more. But I'm growing into this slowly. I'm gradually adding more and more pieces of equipment. I do feel like I need to spend a little bit of time building out a cross-country syllabus, because that is something people keep asking me about, like, how do I plan across country? You know, what are the things to consider? And Team Fly Halo have a good program for that. I think I have some very unique experiences that I think conveying that on a more personal level, I think can go a long way. So there are some things I need to work on and put the time and effort into doing. Right now, I'm more interested in just helping people get into it, have fun, and help them do this cross country. And it would be good, of course, to put an actual syllabus together so people can go through a course. I mean, in an ideal world, maybe they spend a Friday evening going through a ground school and sort of consideration, and then actually plan a flight. You know, maybe if there's two or three teams, where they can plan a flight as a buddy team and decide where they're going to fly from, and work through their plans and their contingencies and their alternates, and then even share that with the rest of the group and say, hey, you know, this is how we planned it. And so that way the group kind of really helps educate each other. It's not me just saying, well, this is how I do it. I think it goes just a little bit broader by getting people to actually think about it, because I'm sure there's things I haven't considered. So I think that's how I would like to approach doing those types of classes, and I just need to build it and advertise it and have people come and do it.
Yeah, cool. Obviously, Robert got kicked off by his own internet, so I'm going to ask a question from Will Fly. He wants to know what Harley's teaching style is. Does he do accelerated training?
When you say accelerated training, I mean, I have had individuals that are sort of doing a crossover, right? They're PG pilots and can get through very quickly. So if I'm teaching one person and they pick it up very quickly and it's just them, can they be accelerated and be done in a few days? That's certainly possible. I think one thing about my teaching style is particularly here in the Bay Area, if you're going to fly in the airspace that we have, it's more critical that you understand about not only the airspace regulation, but also airport operations and how to integrate with other forms of aviation. I think most of us tend to learn, even if you learned at an airport like aviator, you learn just enough about how to fly paramotors, but not necessarily how to become part of an aviation community. And so that is something that I focus a lot more on, and is critical. I mean, there are schools like Aviator and Par America and Ron down in Texas who have these incredibly good goodness, I can't remember the name, but their presentations and how their classes actually articulated. Their syllabuses are just incredible, and they have these great facilities with a lot of stuff. Not every school can have that. I'm too small to have all of it, but I'm big enough that I make sure I have everything, like a tow machine and a hang test and all that kind of thing. And I've seen some places where they accelerate, they never do a tandem. The guys they get are just very athletic. I mean, I remember a PG pilot coming to Black Hawk one time with my instructor called Joe Cruz, and 2 hours and the guy was flying. I was just like, how's that possible? There where I was day 4 or day 5 and nowhere near to getting up in the air, right? So I think everyone progresses at different times. And to short answer is I'm going to find the most suitable method to help each pilot that I work with achieve their goal in the most appropriate time that works for them. I've had a few pilots that are making the transition who say, hey, can I get this done in a couple of days? And I'm like, well, it's possible, but it hasn't worked out that way, and it's taken a little bit more work for some people than for others. So,
I really like what you were describing earlier about, how you're talking about the groups and how they go out and then discuss their routes, how they took, what they learned. I think that's a very interesting concept, because it would kind of get some pilots into self-policing, understanding what they're seeing, what somebody else saw, what they learned from their experience. It gives an opportunity for growth there that is natural in the paramotoring community. I think that you're really onto something there with that idea. I wasn't able to chime in before Anthony asked his question, but I was just like, ooh, I really do like that idea, and I think that could be very successful as far as being able to obtain lessons from that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a unique style. There are plenty of people, instructors, that make their classes very interactive, and I learned a lot of that as a scuba instructor for 20 years, where it's not enough to just tell somebody to go read the information, or to tell them the information in the class and expect them to know it or understand it. So a lot of the times, I'm kind of asking people to, here's some materials, go read them, and then come into a class. And it's much more a question and answer, like, hey, so if this was the situation, or you're flying here near this airport, help explain what you know and what you don't know, and then help build that experience. And there are plenty of guys that do it probably better than I do. In fact, I know they do it better than me. But I'm trying to make it as flexible, and make sure that all the materials that are necessary for people to cover, if they've never been in any form of aviation, like I expect people to get through the online test from USPPA. And that's kind of a requirement, is kind of a personal rule that I have for my students, is you need to go take that class, so that you're demonstrating. It's kind of just like becoming a general aviation pilot, that you do at ground school, you go take the exam. You may already be learning how to fly, but before you get your check ride, you must have completed all of those things, so that we know that you can go out there and be safe. You can teach anyone to fly a paramotor in some reasonable period of time, but I think the bigger picture is thinking about aeronautical decision making. And these are not terms that, when I learned paramotoring, that were very broadly shared. There's a lot of terms that we use in paramotoring that are not necessarily, they don't necessarily align with aviation. But I'm seeing more and more schools use the same terminology, and I think it's a necessity.
We're almost at the halfway point, but before we do, Deweese Milstead wants to know if you're going to EAA Oshkosh this year.
Oh my goodness, I so desperately want to go. I probably have the time. I'm I just unless I can find a way to fly with somebody there, I don't know that I could face the drive again, because I did that a couple years ago. So I guess if I can find the right people to connect with, that I can get there, and find some accommodation. It's a little late in the game, I guess, for me to do that. So
you should. I think you should create something on Facebook, like a PPG hitchhike, and just start and have some sort of networking where people want to travel around the United States. And obviously we're all spread out throughout the United States, and I think it's pretty cool to fly all over the place. And if people like to jump in their camper or their car or something, take off for a couple of days, it'd be kind of cool to know, where to go, and maybe some sort of a link or something, make an app, Harley. You're in Silicon Valley area, so just produce an app, and everybody can just, I'm here, I want to go here. Who's in between? They got a yard you can park your camper in, or a room or something, and maybe even a spare motor.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to go. I would love to know if there's anyone trying to do some some cross country in, right? I mean, Bo Feldman kind of set the pace, right? When he flew from Florida with, big hurricanes chasing him all the way up into Wisconsin, and just did a hell of a thing. I really enjoyed what I did last year, but it would be kind of cool, right, if different people from different states for the same event decided to fly into Oshkosh. Like that would be really, really cool. And it's the kind of thing maybe there's a bit more forethought in terms of communicating that with people and see who would be up for that. I mean, I could see Brad Roper or Trevor Steele and Judson, like going, hey, we're going to fly to Utah. It's not as far as California, but, still got to get over at least one big mountain and some high density stuff. And, it would be really cool for them to, set the pace, really.
All right, Sean, what do you think, man? You got control of I don't know if you know how to transfer to the wheel full screen and all that.
That's an interesting concept and question there, Peregringo. I'm more interested kind of in what exactly am I giving away tonight? I think Robert said something about he's got a wing that he's going to give away. Since he's not here, I'm pretty sure I recall he was giving away a pink wing. I think it was.
He's giving away actually some slightly used internet equipment.
Yeah,
it works really well, but just not at his house. I think he's probably in the trash can by now. He did text me. He goes, the internet completely gone.
He says he's planning on getting Starlink, y'all, and that is the only way that I'm going to be able to get the internet out here. So evidently he's got some internet calamity issues, and that's all right, because calamity, goes hand in hand sometimes. Technology is a helping hindrance, y'all. And I'm going to prove this with a spin of this wheel. Now, there are no doubles in this wheel. I thoroughly checked and double checked and triple checked, quadruple checked. There are no doubles. So yay, go me. And it's a mystery gift. So it's a mystery. What you get is going to be an absolute mystery here.
You might
so here we
get a
go.
rock. You might get a paper bag. I don't know, but
a pet rock, maybe. With a glider.
I don't have Robert's radio voice, but I'll go through his sponsors pretty quickly because I'm not as flavorful on the descriptions here.
Are you ready?
Yeah, if you want to spin it, how long does that spin last? Probably 30, 40 seconds, something like that.
Oh, no, I got it set on the longest it can possibly go, I'm pretty sure.
Can you set it for another 28 minutes?
No, I can't do that. It's as long as it could possibly spin.
It'll reveal itself at the end of the show. I like that. So, all right.
And go.
Yep. The spin of this wheel sponsored by what is it got? Local American Allied Plumbing and not plumbing and heating. I'm in the heating business. American Allied Plumbing. We already talked about PPG smoke. You guys got to watch. See all the announcements. He's shipping. I think this week he's getting pallets delivered and shipping. So PPG smoke, Nebraska PPG. Yeah, you know that guy. Lone Star Paramotor. That's Ron Turan out in Texas. Big state, man. Go get your training there. Max Acro. If you want to get jiggy with it, go learn some acro with Max. What else we got? I think that might be it. I apologize if I'm missing anything other than Calamity Kite Clinic. The best in Sean's neighborhood that teaches you how to kite. All right.
And
maybe Ivan.
Oh no, you know what? We should have said
Ivan Rubio
present to win because he texts me, he goes, I'm sorry, I gotta go. I gotta leave the show. But no, he gets it. Well, that's great because it's local. We don't know what he's gonna get. He probably doesn't have a t-shirt yet now, so I'll get one for Ivan there. That's pretty awesome. He's one of our Ugly Raptors local guys.
Oh, congratulations, Ivan. I knew he was new into the chat, and I was like, well, that's kind of cool, new guy in the chat. And then here he goes winning tonight, and he won. He just left. So, leave it to us to end up spinning his name on the wheel just after he leaves. But congratulations, Ivan.
I'll have to text. I'll let him know here in a second that he won. That's funny.
Heck yeah.
Hey, Scotty.
Yes.
Any questions you can think of for Harley?
Probably, how long do you usually is for a beginner without any PPG experience to start and be pretty competent? Do you usually see what the average is? Because I know it all changes, because Anthony and I, we train at the same time, and I sucked at kiting. Like I was getting so frustrated, like on like day 2, because I had a tandem wing that was pulling me all over, and he's tiptoeing, going everywhere. And it got to a point where it just ended up clicking one day for me, and then it just all worked. What do you see, how long it usually takes?
So I think, when I initially started, it was like, oh, well, everyone, should be able to learn to kite in sort of the 2 or 3 day mark, and sort of look to be in the air at the 4 or 5 day mark. And then, very quickly can progress from there. But what I'm finding, certainly for my school, and I should probably ask the advice of some other schools, but the weather here can be a little interesting. And because we're in a valley, the wind tends to shift, and particularly as the thermal, so we can land up with 0 wind for the first hour, like absolutely nothing, where kiting is all but impossible, right? And then things start to heat up a little, and the wind gets very switchy, and it's coming from different directions. So in defense of my students, sometimes it's taking a little bit longer for them to deal with it, and it's not really their fault. So, it's kind of like, if you want to be Del Shanzi and make it easy for people to kite and go take them onto the beach in Texas where the wind is consistent, and then say that they're competent, okay, be my guest. But
It's just not reality. Yeah.
I think the situation, what I consistently see, and I think I've seen it somewhere else, is people who learn how to fly in a beach environment, they can take off and land so long as the wind is there and it's pretty laminar. But take that same pilot and take them out to the middle of somewhere where things get a little bit more switching. Their kiting's not that great, and their launch and landings are not that great. Now, that's not their fault, right? They have a very limited set of experience. So I think,
Like inland flying, right? You got mountains, you got trees, you got obstacles, you got all things in the way, rotor,
even elevation too.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes a huge difference too.
Exactly. So I think the environment that you learn in can either shorten or lengthen how long it actually takes. And then all of us are different, right? I mean, I'm a little older now. Things don't work, don't click and go easy, and I struggle. I have a 17-year-old who's finishing up, and he went 3-4 weeks without doing any damn kiting and came out and rocked it. And I was expecting him to regress quite substantially, but it stuck there for him. His dad is in his 40s. It seemed to stick for him too. But for me and for other pilots, it's a very perishable skill. Sometimes it doesn't stick that well. So I think my opinion is that where you learn is probably realistically going to determine how quickly you might get airborne and be able to fly. But I think, it's your experience in different environments over a longer period of time that really determines your overall skill level. And I think that's it. So, it's not uncommon that I've seen people that have gone through great programs with great schools and then have a day of no wind takeoffs and things go sideways for them. And they're like, well, I don't understand this. And you've got to help them sort of take a deep breath and realize that, they're overestimating their ability for a weather condition that's a little more foreign. It would be like going for a first flight in a condition that that you just don't have that experience. So, I learned in a more challenging environment, but it still means that I make mistakes in higher wind environments. So it's a long answer. I'm sorry, but the reality is, I think the average has a lot to do with where you learn, what those weather conditions are, and then certainly the school and how many people are working with you. And when you've got 2 instructors for every student, that might be a big difference between 1 instructor and 3 students.
Right.
If they're, especially if they're all at the same the same sort of position in their learning curve, right? If you've got 3 students and one's already flying and one's just learning to kite and someone else is just progressing from into maybe some taxi practice, the gear is heavy and so forth. You can split it all up and you can make it all work. But if you've got 3 or 4 students that are all at the same point, you need more people and resources to help them progress as quickly, because otherwise you're going to hold them back from progressing as fast as they potentially could.
Excellent point. Excellent point. Oh man, look, Scott, Sean, and I thought Dad left the house and we were going to throw a party, but Dad just got home, so
I hacked
we
the
locked him out of the
internet.
house.
I
I've
had to
experienced that
reset.
kind of- Go ahead.
I had to reset the modem.
Oh, really? Are you live?
I'm live. Yeah.
You're live? I'm gonna go say what's up to these people.
All right, buddy.
That's something that I also ran across, Harley, as well with students, where you would have, just a very wide area of somebody just beginning with ground handling and somebody that's done a little bit of it, and somebody that's been a pilot for many years. It's so wide of an area that
Anthony, what
I've
time
run
did you get
across
off
the
work?
exact same situation as what you're talking about, and it can be a bit of a challenge too.
Hey, Robert, and I know you're back, but I was wondering, because I know we're going through time here pretty.
Anthony, you're fired.
Maybe we could try and get through any more questions that people have submitted quickly, and then I know you have more specific questions. I know we didn't talk about specific topics before I go, but I have one small topic that, if I may, I'd like to take 2 minutes to share.
Yes.
Into the show.
Yes, please. Please. Yeah. We went through most of my questions.
All right. So what about in the chat, right? Are there more questions that I haven't answered there?
There are a couple here I just put off to the sidebar. You want me to ask those quickly?
Yeah, let's talk them out. I like talking.
All right. Double D's. What is the most efficient combo of fuel conservation, wing type, prop pitch, blade number, etc., stuff like that?
Short answer, all of the above.
Okay. Duck Spit PPG wants to know what you think of the Aero 1000. And what is that for some of us that don't know what that is?
Yeah, that's. I think he's talking about the Helvenka Aero 1000, which is a big 4-stroke engine that you'll see on some quads or some trikes. Blackhawk Paramotors, I think, have imported and sold that engine probably more than most people that I might be aware of here in the United States. And it's a solid thing. I mean, I wish I could afford one of the big dogs, as Mike Robinson likes to call them, quads, which has that engine on. You can carry the full 500 something odd pounds. So I like the engine.
Okay. There's one more question. Okay. Will Fly, regarding training new students, what's the most challenging thing Harley has to deal with? I know you covered a lot of stuff in that in the kiting training stuff, but
it's me, right? I think one of the things I'm struggling with is that I have a stronger opinion and a stronger position on certain things now, and some things that I kind of feel are important. I try not to let that get in the way in terms of helping people progress in a suitable manner, but I certain things around safety and launch skill sets and so forth that are I don't know if it's just rubbing off on me from general aviation, but sometimes I have to realize that sometimes someone makes a mistake, just give them a minute to kind of work through it themselves, and say, look, hey, can I answer some questions, or do you have any questions for me about what occurred, or what did you learn from that, versus saying, hey, that worked out, but it wasn't ideal, and here's maybe what you should have considered doing. So it's really about striking that balance between trying to sort of push what I think is important versus helping them learn and find a way for themselves to achieve the same thing. So I still think I'm the problem.
Good point. Roberto.
I have more questions. You created more.
Oh dear.
Every question he answers, 2 more questions pop up.
That's just, yeah, that happens. I'm like a reporter, a news reporter. They just keep coming.
Right.
I'm really interested though in what you because you've always got some crazy adventure or something that I just have a feeling you're gonna talk about something wild.
No, I wish I could say that I had something wild planned for this year. I had this idea that I kind of invited Mark Honeycutt to come and do with me, and then he had his own adventure and kind of very quietly pulled it off. So his adventure was too cool, and I'm kind of kicking myself for not kicking off my adventure. I have 2 things that I would like to do. I just right now I don't know if I can make them happen this year, and I haven't really put the planning in. And of course, we're going into hurricane season, so my goal is I have 2 things I would like to pull off next year, and they'll be big. The implication of what they'll do will I hope be at least one of them will be the biggest thing that I've ever done, and it's really probably the most risky, I think, in terms of the things that I have done. I think after that, if I had my way, I would love to do a 50-country tour in 7 continents and all that kind of nonsense. But short answer, Michael, Robert, there's nothing nailed down for this year. It's not to say something couldn't happen, but there's nothing nailed down. My aerial photography business is struggling this year, and I just people are struggling all the way around with the potential recession and layoffs. My oldest client, fortunately not my biggest client, liquidated a couple of weeks ago. So that was very disturbing, and a particular line of business that I have with them is now gone. So I have no idea what the rest of this year is going to do. Maybe I'll have a lot more time to teach paramotoring.
Yeah. And fly more.
Yeah, the cool thing was, actually, talk about flying more, I finally was able to complete my complex and high performance endorsement for general aviation.
Yeah, so I saw that.
This fast.
Congratulations on that.
Congrats. That's awesome.
Yeah. And I took a friend, I flew them, up to Reading today, and then came back, and it was a very, very expensive 3 hours of flying. But when you're used to being in a little Cessna 172 and you're putzing around at 70 knots or 90 miles an hour, and then suddenly you're doing 130, 140 miles an hour, it's kind of fun. Is the only way I can describe it. And I had to come over Travis Air Force Base today on the way back, and they had a couple C-130s coming in underneath me, so I had to stay a lot higher than I was expecting to. And so I must have cranked it down from 5,000 feet down to 1,000 feet in about 2 minutes, and pulled a 180, and it was so cool, so much fun. I mostly get giddy like this about flying paramotors, but it's been fun flying that airplane.
Man, yeah, that's a really huge thing right there.
Thank you.
It's a goal of mine as well. I'm super stoked for you. And at some point when once I can get to that place.
Yeah.
think it's a,
Well, now, of
Right,
course, I'm
usually
working on
that's
my
fine.
commercial. I've got all the prerequisites out the way, and the ground school's all done, the exams done. So the next 2 months, hopefully, I'll have a commercial rating and try and make some money out of flying airplanes too.
oh yeah, that's great. There's a handful of guys that are doing that here. Free flight paraglider pilots that are now technically, one of them's an instructor now. And yeah, there's an airport right down the street. So when you want to come to San Diego, you want to fly straight to Ramona, you can land in my backyard pretty much.
Yeah, if I can ever find a way to afford my own plane. I know Gringo keeps trying to get me to come down.
Come on.
I'm flying the paramotor. 'cause that's what-
Don't listen. Having a plane is like having a boat. You just want a friend that owns one. You don't
yeah.
want to own it yourself, right? So the cost,
Yeah.
expense, just rent it or find a friend that has it.
Exactly. I don't need to own it. I need to have a friend who owns it, right?
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it's been pretty cool. Actually, Robert, you mentioned about how more and more of your friends that are in PG and PPG, and I think, how they're learning to fly airplanes. It is surprising because, for me, general aviation felt totally out of my reach, most of my entire life. And of course, after the 50-state tour and staying at a lot of airports and then flying paramotors at them, I realized, like, oh my goodness, the aviation system here in the United States is just so it gives so much ability for people to get into aviation, and that the system makes it fairly easy to go do that. And so, apart from the overall expense, it's amazing what you can do and how many resources are available to help people become aviators. I kind of see, powered paragliding and paragliding in general and all forms of ultralight as the gateway drug, right? It's the gateway to, can you afford it? Can you do it? And eventually you go like, well, I got the cool paramotor, now I want the big airplane kind of scenario. And, I thought I would just
Yeah.
license for the hell of it. And now I can't stop, right? I mean, it's been like the
Yeah.
paramotoring where I don't know what else to do. So, I think the real challenge that we're all facing, and this is sort of that, I'll only talk about it for 2 minutes, is that one unfortunate trend that I'm seeing here across the whole United States is that the FAA put out a mandate, I don't know, like 2003, I guess, as a result of 9/11, right? And the idea was to improve the security at all airports in the United States. And so, up until even just a couple of years ago, the vast majority of uncontrolled airports, they had gate access, either a pedestrian gate access or even car access, where you could punch in a code, which if you knew people at that airport, you were able to get from that, or the airport manager would give it to you, and you'd be able to get onto the airfield and go fly your ultralight. Some of us have bigger ultralights where you have to unload them from a trailer and put the wings on, or whatever it is, right? Trikes and so forth. Well, unfortunately, with the improvement in security, a lot of these uncontrolled airports are switching to some form of card access or a fob or something along those lines. And that by itself wouldn't be such a big issue, except for the fact that they're also have some of them have decided, at least, that they are only going to allow people who are paying tenants on that airport. In other words, they have a tie down or they have a hangar. They're only going to allow those people to be able to drive onto the airfield and do that flying. Now, I can tell you straight up from my engagement with the FAA that if they are a public airport that is funded by the FAA and they are only allowing paying tenants to do that, they're in violation of the regulations. And that is an issue that I am actively addressing with the Flight Standards Office, the West Coast it's the ADO, it's the airports compliance division. And so there's a West Coast one, and there's some others across the country. And so, you know, I've been dealing recently with several airports that just in the last 6 to 9, 12 months have made this switch and then decided they're not going to allow anybody on there. And so, unfortunately, some of the airports don't want to play ball. They don't want to hear and sort of play, you know, explain to them why this is wrong. And this doesn't only affect ultralights. I mean, you know, a bunch of people, when we file these reports with the airport management to say, hey, we're being denied access, or they're not making it easy for us to get on the airfield anymore, or they're intentionally making it very difficult and throwing all kinds of additional requirements that weren't there before, merely because they switched from a PIN code to a card access to provide security. You know, it's kind of crazy. And so I've had success with a couple of airports, and we've had some airports where they're just they're going to land up where the FAA is going to file I think it's a Part 13 and a Part 16, where they are at risk of actually losing their federal funding. And in some cases, if they actually break, you know, do things like violate civil rights, or it impacts someone with a disability, they may be liable for civil suits beyond that. So that's still stuff I'm investigating and trying to get more information on. And it's very, very challenging. But the one thing I have found is, you know, a lot of times paramotor pilots, when we need to fly from an airport because we don't have anywhere else to fly from, you know, they'll approach an airport manager and say, hey, we'd like to fly here. And they say no, and then they give up. And so one of the things I know I need to do is do a video of kind of a how to approach an airport and try and get the access that you need. But if you run into certain types of no, essentially, how you might try and address that. But I think that if for anyone who watches this video and has been denied access for one reason or another to an airport, whether you are a general aviation pilot or any other kind of pilot who needs to be able to come on field and conduct a legitimate aeronautical activity, and that could be as simple as even kiting your wing on an airport. If you are being prohibited or not being cooperated with to go do that, the most important thing that you could do right now is actually file an official report with the airport's compliance division. So it's referred to as the ADO, which is Airports Division Office, I think is what that is. And this helps protect not only, you know, your rights, but the rights of all aviators across the country. You know, I've made the point that, you know, let's say you fly in a general aircraft and you land on the airport, and now you need to be able to get some piece of equipment or a person from the other side of the fence, and they don't fit through the pedestrian fence, or it's too far, or it risks anything. They're not making any provisions to be able to do that. And the regulation is pretty clear that they do have to make reasonable provision to do that. So all I can say is, at least what I can share today is, if you're being denied for any reason whatsoever, file the report, because the FAA understands that this is a big problem, and they are working to take action on a bigger scale. But the more the resources are consumed by these reports, the more likely and the quicker they're more likely they are to put out some kind of a memorandum or an advisory circular to push airports and airport management to do the right thing and to develop the right procedures and processes that help people make use of those airports.
Harley, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. I really appreciate it. The moderation team, thank you for handling business for me with the bad internet stuff. I don't know what the heck happened. I reset my modem. We're back online. It's shaky, but I think I'm going to have to go Starlink. Thank you, all the supporters on Patreon and PayPal, all the guys that come in and watch the show faithfully every week. You guys are awesome.
And
we will there is going to be an after show. I did catch that you guys covered most of the sponsors. Thank you. Nebraska PPG, Lone Star Paramotor, maxacro.com, Resurgence PPG. Thank you guys for handling that. I really appreciate that. If you do want to support Resurgence PPG, they are a 501c3 and they got some really good stuff going on. Todd Scandrett is the one that runs that. You can actually ping him off of resurgencepppg.com. So really appreciate you guys. We're going to go to the after show. Have a great night. If I don't see you on the air, I'll see you in the air. Thank you so much for